Hello, everybody. It's your boy, Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming here today with a discussion on how villains are written. Let's talk Xenoblade Chronicles 2, shall we? Because Xenoblade 2 has quite a few antagonistic characters, doesn't it? We have three main factions. We got Torna with Jin, Malos, Akos, Mikhail, and Patroka. And then we have Indo with primarily Amalthus. And then we have the Nopon with Bana and Mui Mui. And I know they tend to be more joke characters, but they do serve a role and have a purpose in telling the story and furthering it along and making it more engaging. Now, in totality, when you look at the list, it's a lot of villains, right? Or at least a lot of antagonists. But they all serve different roles to flesh out the world with their various motivations and methodologies. Now, I have mentioned this before, but Xenoblade 2 lulls you in with a false sense of security with various anime tropes and archetypes to make you believe that you are going to get one type of story. But then, around the halfway point, I like to point to Chapter 5 personally, it drops a lot of that and showcases a level of depth and emotional relatability to these characters and the overall story that you weren't expecting. At least for me, and it almost, borderline, throws you off since it comes so unexpectedly. And it honestly just starts to feel like a different game and is arguably jarring when you beat Xenoblade 2 and you go back to the beginning of the game and realize all these tropes are there that you just kind of forgot about. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing though. It's a narrative strategy. You think Malos and Jin just want to kill everybody and destroy the world, because they are the villains, right? And Jin might have lost his love and wants to take his anger out on everybody else or whatever. Sure, they are cool and they are villains, and there are hints that there is something deeper going on, but you aren't expecting them to become the characters that they do become. You aren't expecting the complexity for these characters. But then they introduce Amalthus and the fact that he is Malos' driver, and you start to, quite literally, see Malos in Amalthus. The other characters brush this off as Rex just seeing things, or, there being some connection between driver and blade, as was suggested by Gramps. But for the player, this is an important moment because it suggests that there is something deeper there, whether it be Malos-inspired Amalthus, or vice versa. And we would come to realize at some point later on in the game that it was Amalthus who inspired Malos. The concept of blades is an important one. It's important to understand the reasoning and why these antagonists are so compelling. Blades are life forms that are inherently tied to another person, and when they die, the blade also, quote-unquote, for lack of a better phrase, dies. Granted, they are returned to their core crystal, but their memories are wiped for them. So in essence, to the blade, it is very similar to death. That mechanic of the world could easily have been there just to give us a bunch of sweet Digimon to fight with, or collect in the gacha system. But it isn't. And the concept is explored that almost an inherently parasitic relationship is at the heart of the conflict for the antagonists of Torna. And the Tornan antagonists are who I really want to focus on for this video. Now granted, I just used the word parasitic there to describe the blade driver mechanic, and there might be a better word or phrase to really describe it, but think about it. If the blade dies, the driver can live on. But if the driver dies, the blade gets reborn. To certain blades like Jin, and through their perspective, that concept could be viewed as an inherently parasitic relationship, where the blades are reliant on drivers to survive, but the drivers aren't reliant on blades. They can use them as essentially meat shields if they really wanted to. Now, that motivation will drive the dynamic of Torna throughout the game. And because Xenoblade 2 doesn't elect to just go surface level with its narrative themes, it can really flesh out these dynamics and make you question the current world state. You may not agree with Jin and Malos' methods, you aren't supposed to, but you can see how they arrived at their conclusions, their solutions to these larger existential problems that they are plagued with. The world of Xenoblade 2 is a surprisingly cruel one, and on multiple occasions they are willing to both tell and show you the cruelty of this world, and its people, and what its people are capable of. Whether it be Indol wiping out the torn survivors leading to Laura's death and Jin's despair, or Zeke telling Amalthus of where he found Pandoria's core crystal that I won't repeat here, or Amalthus's entire freaking backstory, or how Laura resonated with Jin, and how Jin had to immediately save Laura from her father. Or do you remember that Bandit questline back when we only had Rock's core crystal for that moment of time? All those moments and pieces of story, they flesh out the world and make it so the game is willing to showcase the dark underbelly of this mystical and magical world of giant titans that house civilizations up in the clouds. It's almost like a dreamscape in terms of the aesthetic for the game, but it's willing to show you that dark underbelly and how multifaceted this world really is. And the antagonists of Xenoblade 2 thrive off of that. And in Torn of the Golden Country, Malos is largely just shown as a villain and wants to destroy the world. He's cocky, arrogant, and a force to be reckoned with. But in 2, what they managed to do is flesh out his character and show how he went from that typical villain he was in Torna to this character who still wants to kill the architect and destroy the world, but has developed relationships and friendships with like-minded individuals who have also been shown and have first-hand experience with the cruelty of this dying world of Allrest. He genuinely cares about Jin, and for a character who really gave off the vibe that it would be revealed that he was just using all of them, he isn't that kind of guy. Even in the very end where I think he tries to give off that idea, you can tell he's lying or just not being truthful. He cared about Jin and wants to accomplish their goal not just for himself anymore, but for Jin and the rest of Torna. They have a collective dream now. And now pivoting the discussion over to Jin a little bit, Jin isn't just some heartbroken villain who wants to take his anger out on anyone else. He has legitimate criticisms of the state of the world and views the whole blade system as fundamentally broken. He has questions that he doesn't believe have answers. He serves as Rex's foil, who poses the large and existential questions that Rex would have to develop answers for. And I made an entire video about Jin specifically that I'll leave in the comments down below. But serving as Rex's foil is an important piece as to why Jin is such a compelling villain. As you develop one character, you also simultaneously develop the other, as they are each posed with certain questions but provide different solutions to those questions, and different perspectives on it, and their worldview. Malos isn't necessarily a foil character, though you may expect him to be Mithra and Pyra's foil. I'd argue the larger dynamic at play here, for Malos, is with Amalthus, showcasing how one's upbringing can emotionally shape someone. Malos was brought into this world of Allrest by Amalthus, who had a fundamental hatred for this world and its people, and viewed blades as nothing more than tools to solve problems. All that negativity and hatred flowed into Malos until he believed that his entire goal was to just be the destroyer, this malignant force in the world whose sole purpose was to wipe the slate clean and burn everything down. And while his end goal is the same as stereotypical villains who just want destruction for destruction's sake, what Xenoblade 2 does so well, and why its antagonists are so well written, is establishing why and how Malos and these other characters ended up like that. And also adds a little bit of nuance that his goal is no longer necessarily purely selfish like we mentioned before. He's different now, because he's doing it for his friends who want something similar. When Mikhail shows hesitation to the ultimate goal of destruction down in the ruins of Morditha, that was such a golden opportunity for them to just paint Malos as a character who does not care about anyone else but himself and wants to destroy the world, but they didn't do that. And it's one of the scenes where I appreciate Malos the most here. This entire Morditha chapter, Malos doesn't lay into him, or cut him off, or anything stereotypical like that. He acts like a teacher to a student who is still in the process of learning, saying that, hey, it's okay to still have questions, it's okay to still have doubt. I'm not asking for total obedience here. You will come around in time. And it may seem small in the moment, in the heat of the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, It's all those moments, all those individual moments with Malos like that, which create such an interesting and compelling narrative. Remember when Jin got back to the Monoceros after the Mortifer section? He gets healed up in the machine, and then Malos expresses genuine concern for his well-being and emotional state. Again, it's scenes like that that make you care more about those characters and their relationships with one another. The reason that Xenoblade 2's villains work so well is not just because that they are interesting, or that they're interesting characters, but because they further the themes and messages of the game as a whole. What the game is trying to tell you, how these characters develop their motivations, how these systems in Allrest and dynamics led to these characters' mindsets. Torna, especially for Jin. I cannot overstate or say often enough how perfect of a backstory for Jin that Torna the Golden Country really was. Because these characters, they don't just feel like characters occupying the world to tell you a story. They feel like they are part of the world, that the world they're in and its history shaped them and molded them into who you see now in the game. They are part of the world, and they reveal other aspects to it that aren't necessarily positive, but are dark and gritty and putrid. That's why Xenoblade 2 has such a compelling narrative. Because the story all feels interconnected. The characters feel like they are part of this very unique and interesting world, and we see how multifaceted this world really is, and how the various systems and mechanics of it can shape people. Sometimes for the worst, and sometimes for the better with the protagonists. I could go in on how greed will always remain as a concept, even and almost especially in a dying, opportunistic world like Allrest, and how that concept is epitomized with the character of Bana. I could go into even further detail into Mikhail, Akos, and Petroka, and how they show that it's not just these large and important figureheads that suffer because of the systems of the world, like the Paragon of Torna, or the Aegis Blades, or the Prince of Tantal, or the Grand Inquisitor of Mordain. It's not just those large, important people in society that suffer from these systems, but also these common everyday people who just try to live, who suffer from these worldwide systems. Does it help that Jin and Malos' VAs are absolutely goated? Yes, but they feel like characters who got a raw deal, and while we disagree with them, they show us multiple different perspectives of this world of Allrest, and we can see and understand how they arrived at the conclusions and motivations, and why they hate Indol, and why they hate Amalthus. Especially in Mikhail's case, especially in Jin's case, especially in Malos' case, especially in all of their cases. That is when I find villains to be the most compelling. Not necessarily when they are super emotional and relatable, or when they are just mean and vicious for mean and vicious sake, but when they are characters that add to the world and showcase different parts of it. When they feel like they are part of this world and that the world and story being told shaped them as characters. There isn't any rulebook for constructing a compelling narrative, but a guideline I would always defend and point to that tends to lead to compelling stories, again, at least in my opinion, is making the characters feel real and feel like they are actual people in this world, and that their emotions and mental state and who they are as characters was shaped and formed by the various cogs and wheels that make this world turn. Now, you may be saying there, Jmulls, can't that also apply to protagonists or side characters? And I would agree, because to me, that formula of making them feel like they are part of the world, and whether or not they are emotionally relatable and understandable, and you just feel so bad for them, they have a tragic backstory or whatever, or they're just raw, evil, mean, rude, inconsiderate, unkind, unsportsmanlike. They'll kick you in the balls, flip you off, and then hit you with a stone cold stunner, and that they just want to destroy the world because that's what they want to do on their Tuesdays. All those types of characters, especially all those villains, if you make them feel like they're a part of the world, and that they occupy a world with other characters and other people in it, I think you're well on your way to creating interesting and engaging characters that we want to learn more about. Because to me, that is why the villains in Xenoblade 2 were so compelling. They felt like they were a product of the world, who were faced with multiple questions by the world itself, and they gave their answer. Was it the right answer? Do you agree with the answer? You don't have to, because it was the answer that they designed, that they came up with, that they think is right. Because they, as characters, add to the story of the world. Because they make the characters around them, and they make the protagonists more interesting, more compelling, and they make the other antagonists more interesting and more compelling. And there are so many other reasons that I love these characters so much, but I feel like these are the general broad strokes as to why I love the antagonists of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So I'm going to call the video there for the day. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment down below with who your favorite antagonist in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is. Are you a Jin stan? Are you a Malos stan? Maybe you're a big fan of Arcos, or Mikhail, or Petroka, or Malthus, or Bana. Or maybe you're like, you know who my villain is? My true villain? Mooey Mooey. Maybe that's you. I want to hear your perspective and hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Because your thoughts may have differed from mine, and that's entirely fine. But I would love to hear why you think why you do. Why you think it. Who do you think is your favorite villain in the game? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Or do you just not like any of the villains in Xenoblade 2? That's also valid. Let me hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your opinions. Do you love the villains of Xenoblade 2? Let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear your opinions. I'd love to hear them. And while you're down there in the comments, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.